May peace and blessings be upon you and welcome. You're watching the My Voice show on EOS with your host, Aisha Heather. You may have heard of us from our magazine, My Voice Magazine. We're the voice of Muslim youth, and we come together to discuss the things that matter to us. Today, we're talking about dawah through actions. So, I think we can take our daily interactions for granted. God has given us power to choose how to respond in every situation we encounter throughout our day. That means every moment is an opportunity to bring each other closer to the truth. Are we making the most of our moments? How can we make the most of our moments? To help us answer this question, we have joining us today Rafi Sheikh. He's an older brother to me. He is someone who I've grown up with in our neighborhood. I'm so excited to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome, Aisha. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Alhamdulillah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, fine.
Yeah. So you bring our community together a lot. What do you have in mind when you're doing so?
So first I just want to say I feel like that's a little bit of an overstatement, bringing the community together a lot. I do the most that I can, and I know there's many people out there who do a lot more. And alhamdulillah, like Allah has given me the tawfiq to help out in various areas, and I tried the best that I can in those areas. That being said, what I have in mind in those times is the teachings that I have learned about Rasulullah and his life, and as well as the Sahaba, and how they implemented this deen in their life, and the sunnah that Rasulullah ﷺ showed us how to live our 24-hour daily life. So, and one of the biggest lessons that he taught us was unity, right? That united we stand and divided we fall. So Rasulullah taught us this very, very important concept, and I feel that we really need to reflect on this concept, and we really need to take in what it means to be united. Now, when I was young, I was in elementary school, and there was this kid who was a little bit younger than us, and he used to come and try to join our group and like try to play with us, and I was like, me and a couple of my friends, we weren't too nice to him, and we kind of didn't let him, like, join us and said, go play with someone your own age or something, and his father approached me sometime later, and he said that you should include everybody in like what you guys are doing, because you guys are all in one. You guys are part of one nation. And for this, he took a tree branch off, and he gave it to me, and he said, break it in half. And then so I broke it in half, and then he said, break it again. And he kept telling me to break it until there was numerous sticks in my hand. He said, break it, and I said, I can't break it more. Then he said that similarly, this is how our ummah is. If we stand together, if we're all united for one cause, and then someone tries to break it, you won't be able to break it, right? So single people like who stand alone, it's hard for them to stand alone, and it's easier to be broken, right? But people standing together, in a good quantity of them, they stand together stronger. So this lesson really stuck with me, and I keep this in mind, like when I'm going out, when I'm doing whatever effort that I can. This is one of the examples that stays with me.
And we're so grateful for those people, right? Sometimes like it can be harsh because like it can be painful to be like told, because you feel like you're being told, but then once the lesson sinks in and you carry it with you, you're so grateful, like, thank you. I know it was probably tough for them to do that, maybe.
Absolutely,
like, to come approach a child and be like, hey, but it's important.
When I was in that moment when he was telling me this, like I kind of, it did, it hurt, right? But then after, like, as life progressed, I really looked back at it, and I was really young at that time, and now that I look back at it, and that lesson stuck with me. It really, really stuck with me, and the example that he gave was so beautiful. It was a beautiful example that stuck with me.
I know that feeling. I was kind of bratty when I was younger. Maybe I still am a little bit. But so I'm so grateful that you are conscious of unity when you're going about your daily life. And something that I think promotes unity is dawah. So for the viewers, and for me too, to have a better understanding, what is dawah? What importance does Allah put on dawah?
So dawah is essentially is calling people towards righteousness, right? Now what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, and I'm quoting the ayah, He says, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhuna 'anil munkar." You are the best of people raised for mankind, enjoining the right and forbidding the wrong, and believing in Allah. From this ayah, we can understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put a huge emphasis that you are the best of nations, right? And to be the best of nations, you're calling people towards goodness and stopping them from evil. Now, in our 24-hour daily life, there's the small little things that we can do to call people towards righteousness, right? I mean, like even when it comes down to like prayer time comes in, right? And we're with our friends or family or whomever, and we say that, you know, it's time for prayer. Wherever we are, let's pray. You know, whether we're inviting them to the masjid or whether we're praying wherever we are, you know, just telling them that, you know, it's time for prayer, let's pray. That in itself is a form of dawah. It's calling someone towards righteousness. Another place Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, "And whose speech is better than one who invites towards Allah, does righteousness, and says, 'Indeed, I am of the Muslims.'" Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, he's telling us that whose speech can be better than one who is inviting towards Allah, right?
Yeah.
So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's many ayah in the Quran. If we reference the Quran and the Hadith, there's many places where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts emphasis on dawah and calling people towards righteousness, and he puts it at the top of everything, because we're human beings, you know, we make mistakes, we forget, we have a tendency to forget, you know, and we forget like things with dunya too, right? Like that happens to us all the time. But one of the main things is that it's the hereafter, you know, it's a serious concept, and we forget about it. But to remind each other, to you know, to bring each other back towards righteousness, I feel like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts a lot of emphasis in that in the Quran, because it's one of the best things that you can do, calling people towards Allah. Right?
So, in joining each other, calling each other to righteousness, you know, how should we, you know, how should we do this? Like, what should our approach be? Should we change the approach of calling people to righteousness? For example, in a teaching profession, we're constantly working on our method. So, do you feel like we need to rework our method? We need to consider, you know, like how to do, what is the best way to do this?
So, with the turn of the century and, like, you know, the movement of like technology and everything, especially now, like, you know, we're always sharing stuff on Facebook, on Instagram, and we're always sharing posts, and that in itself is also a form of dawah too, you know, sharing posts and different verses of the Quran. There's lots of pages that I follow personally that have a lot of Islamic reminders. So, you know, like if we're posting and, like, you know, we're pushing for through social media, of course that's a very good way to do it. However, I feel like we really need to look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ and how the Prophet conveyed dawah, because he didn't only just go around, like, you know, spreading information and just telling people, you know, that you need to do this or you need to do that. He also did it passively too, in his characteristics, right? And his entire life, how he lived it. We have so many lessons to derive from there, right? So we really need to go back to the basics and really look at how Rasulullah lived his life, how he did the dawah, how his Sahaba did the dawah. After Rasulullah passed away, the Sahaba took this message everywhere in the world, right? There's so many empires that got this message afterwards, and they spread it in different ways, right? And we really need to look into their lives and engage how they did it, and try to implement that as best as possible, because at that point, that's when Islam spread the most, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to the basics, because I think like that's something that we can forget. Like it's sort of, we can overlook it, you know, but it's so important to revisit the basics. You know, why did these work and why are they here in the first place? So thank you for that reminder. And I think before we leave for our break, I'm just going to share something from our Just Ask page. It's left by a youth. They've asked a question. Earlier I was speaking about God giving us the power to choose how to respond in every situation. So we come across so many different situations, and this situation is something that's going to resonate with a lot of us. So this person asks, lately I've seen a lot of women and children on street corners and shops begging for money. Instead of giving them money, I want to be able to help them get a job or find a safe place. How do I help?
So for this, what my personal take would be is that in Canada we have a lot of community centers, we have a lot of facilities provided by the government and private communities. So number one, to do research on where these communities are and how they help different people. And if you're going to approach people who are, begging on street corners and whatnot, just be careful and be mindful because everybody is different. So you're gonna go and if you're gonna go approach them, just be careful. But if you do, then just let them know about like the different programs that are out there and different ways that the community can help. In addition to that, you can also you can go out to these centers and ask them if there's any volunteer opportunities or anything that they can do on an extracurricular level to help out with this situation itself.
So be aware of the situation that you're in and be knowledgeable, and often that'll be the best way to help you determine the best response in that situation. So we're going to take a short break. We have more to share, so stay tuned. Welcome back to the My Voice show on EOAS. You're with your host, Aisha Heather. Before the break, we were speaking about dawah through actions with our guest, Rafi Sheikh. We talked about calling each other to righteousness. And to do this, we need to go back to the basics. So, going back to our basics, then what does dawah look like in our daily interactions and behaviors?
So what dawah would look like in going back to the basics is following as close to the sunnah as possible. Looking into the life of Rasulullah and how he lived his 24-hour daily life, because he taught us how to do anything and everything that we may encounter in our day-to-days. For example, just drinking water, something as simple as drinking water, sitting down, reading Bismillah, drinking in 3 sips, saying Alhamdulillah at the end. These are all sunnahs that Rasulullah taught us. And this was something that I was taught as a kid growing up by my parents and my various teachers. And it became habitual. And once I was in school, I would also do this too. Like whenever we'd have gym class and whatnot, I would sit down, have my water bottle and drink 3 sips. And people noticed sometimes and then they would ask me. And this gave me a really good opportunity to explain the life of Rasulullah, right? So another thing that we need to look into is how Rasulullah interacted with his youngsters, the elders, his neighbors, every single person that came into his life, how he interacted with them, and treat them the way that they need to be treated, that they should be treated, and that in itself is also would be a form of dawah, right? If we treat our neighbors well, that's also a form of dawah. Now in our community, in that area, we have the masjid like right in the middle. So I would walk out of my house, and this was Ramadan time, and I was walking towards the masjid, and I noticed one of my friends, and he was delivering food to one of his neighbors. And this was a custom practice. In Ramadan, like we'd always send food to each other. And but his neighbor was non-Muslim. And then I asked him, like they're not fasting, like why did you send food? And then he reminded me that Rasulullah taught us to be how to be with the neighbors. If we're doing it for our Muslim neighbors, we should also do it for them too. True. And when he sent the food over to them, it sparked a conversation. They asked, what's the occasion? Why are you sending us food? And he said, it's Ramadan, we're fasting,
Why are you sending us food?
Yeah, they were confused. They were just like, what's the occasion? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
And then it gave them an opportunity, it gave him an opportunity to tell them, this is Ramadan, we fast, and this is what our, next month looks like. And they have a better understanding too. And then they sent food back to them,
Wow.
So, yeah, I think it's really important in our daily lives how we behave towards others. Rasulullah has taught us all of that, and we really need to look at how he did all of this, how he interacted with each person in each walk of life, and try to bring that as much as possible into our own lives.
And then What would you say are some of the challenges that the prophets and their companions experienced while they were, going out and giving dawah, or just even through their character, being themselves, whatever the ways were in which they did dawah, like actively or passively? I think you mentioned that earlier. What were the challenges that they faced? And how did they overcome them? Sorry.
So Rasulullah and his Sahaba, they and even all the other prophets, they gave dawah actively and passively, like we talked about earlier. They faced many challenges that are not even close to as severe today. At that time, like Nuh alayhi salam, he gave dawah for about 950 years. Right? And different narrations have different numbers, but it was approximation that time. And there was only a handful of people who actually listened to him. People ridiculed him, people put their hands and fingers in their ears, walked away, and they completely made a joke out of it. And if we look at our own prophet, there was people who laughed at him, people who, to the degree that they even opposed him. When the prophet went to Ta'if, that story we know all very well. When he went there to talk to the chiefs over there, they completely disregarded him, and they disregarded the message, and they told him to leave the city, and they showed him no hospitality, but Taif was known for hospitality, and they didn't show him any of it. And to the degree where Rasulullah, when he was leaving, they told the kids to pelt him with stones, and then when he left and he got to the outskirts, he was bleeding a lot, and
bleeding on his feet?
Yeah, on his feet, and his sandals were like stuck to his feet because of the blood. And at that point, what he did was he prayed for them, he made dua for them. Right? Now this shows us that how Rasulullah dealt with even difficult people, and the challenges that they faced were much more severe than what we're facing today, and there are going to be difficult people that we come across in our lives, but Rasulullah told us to deal with them with forgiveness and patience. And that's what we can derive from this story.
Yeah. And he really chose, because they say, I believe the story goes that an angel had come down asking if they had, if he wanted to, if he wanted that God would punish the people of Taif. And
the angel came down for the punishment, right?
Exactly. And then what did he say?
And then what Rasulullah said was that, "Allah, please forgive me for the weakness that I have within myself." And he started asking for forgiveness for himself, for his own weakness. And he said that, please don't send azab on these people. Please don't punish these people. Rather, maybe somebody will come from their progeny who will accept Islam. An interesting point over there is that Muhammad bin Qasim was actually from the generation of Taif, and he's the one who actually brought Islam to the Asiatic area. So the reason that one of the main reasons that we're Muslim today is because Rasulullah showed forgiveness and patience on that occasion.
Wow. So when we're trying to work with the challenges that we have, something that's so important is remembering to forgive and to have mercy and to have patience.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the challenges you face when you bring our community together? I know you said, oh no, I don't bring the community together, but I think you do. So what are some of the challenges that you face when you're bringing our community together?
This is not just myself. I face challenges myself too. And one of the biggest ones that I want to get into is how we're very divided. We don't see eye to eye on a lot of concepts, right? And because of this, our communities are very the minute things, exactly. And we don't see eye to eye on those things, and because of that, we develop this. I wouldn't say hatred. I feel like that's too strong of a word. But we start disliking people, and we start looking down on people, and sometimes people you think that you're better than someone because you're following a different aspect of it. So one thing that I feel that has caused us to divide a lot is not being able to see eye to eye on all of these concepts, and not seeing eye to eye. That's inevitably will happen, right? That will inevitably happen, and just because we're all different, right? We're all entitled to our own opinions, so we're all going to see things differently. But what we need to learn is how to respect each other and respect each other's opinions. Now, I have a friend that we grew up together, and a lot of the stuff that we learned was very similar. You know, we were going down one path, and
Yeah.
like, you know, we learned everything the same way, and we were really close. And eventually, we started touching on concepts of Islam and whatnot. We talk a lot about other things too, but at one point we touched on the topic of Islam.
Yeah.
And eventually he had a different opinion than I did on a lot of things, and we discussed them, and we tried to respect each other, but we'd get into arguments, and eventually these arguments would become heated, and you know, it would become like uncomfortable to a certain degree. But we still remained friends, right? I mean, we still remained friends throughout having difference of opinion. And then eventually what happened was we sat down one time, we said that, you know what, whenever we talk about this stuff, we get into like, you know, these arguments, and, you know, we get really heated. What's the reason for it? And what we came down to was that we're not trying to see things from the other person's perspective. What we're doing is that we're trying to push our own opinion onto the other person. And because in these conversations, what would happen is that I would be pushing my opinion, he would be pushing his opinion, and the clash would happen there.
Yeah, and that happens when it comes to anything. It's not simply religion, it comes in so many topics.
Absolutely. And at that point, it's like, do we stop being friends?
Yeah.
Do we, like, you know, take different paths or different walks in life just because we have a different opinion? No, we don't, right? We still remain friends, and we learn to respect each other for these opinions, and have a proper discussion. We try to see things from the other person's perspective, right? Because he may have a better outlook on something than I do, right? You can learn something, absolutely. And that's the conclusion that we came to. And after that, what he tried and I tried as well was trying to see things from the other person's perspective. So these arguments, they became less. We'd still discuss, we'd still have difference of opinion, but I learned to respect these differences and try to see things from a different light, from a different view. And it became really nice after. So what I feel that one of the biggest challenges that we're facing, coming back to the question, is that we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, and we really need to. We really need to look at where someone is coming from, what their opinion is, why is that their opinion, right? And what does their opinion entail, right? And as long as we're within, like, you know, the folds of Islam,
and it's an informed opinion.
Absolutely, exactly. It's an informed opinion. We can learn something from them. Even if we choose necessarily not to follow it, we can learn something from it too. Because Rasulullah, what he did in his life, now coming back to tying it together, how Rasulullah did things, he did things differently at different times, on different occasions, based on what was going on at that time. There was times where he was traveling, so he changed the way he would pray. Right? He would combine two salahs together. And there are people who say, no, you can't combine two salahs together. You have to get to a certain distance. And now they're arguing about the distance that you have to, get to. Now, these are really minute things, and, to have feuds over them and fights over it. It's not something that is very intellectual, I would say. I feel like we really need to take a minute, take a step back, try to understand where the other person is coming from.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. And before we end off, I'm just going to do one quick riddle.
Okay.
Yeah, just a small game, quick riddle. Okay, so leave me and you will never find the treasure. Use me and you will attain Allah's pleasure. Allah's pleasure. What am I?
Repeat that one more time, please.
Leave me and you will never find the treasure. Use me and you will attain Allah's pleasure.
Is it salah?
Okay, that's
it works.
I think that was a bad riddle because there's so many things that work.
Yeah, it works.
The answer is the Quran, but I feel like salah is a really, really good answer too. I feel like there's so many answers.
I feel like it's a better answer.
I feel like that's a better answer.
Okay.
Anyway, that was pretty bad riddle.
No, it's good.
Okay, so that was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And it was a privilege watching each other grow and being able to sit down and have a conversation on something that we hold so sacred. It really means a lot. Thank you. And thank you to you for joining us. Please tune in next time. We'll have another guest. We'll have more to share. In the meantime, visit our website, subscribe to our newsletter, our magazine, and if you would like to create a chapter in your own city, then write to us and we'll get you involved. Thank you so much. Take care from the My Voice team on EOS.